In a single year, football clubs handed $500 million to a group of people who never kicked a ball. They never scored a goal, they never stepped onto the pitch, never took a penalty in front of 80,000 screaming fans, and never had to ice a torn hamstring. Yet, they walked away with a massive chunk of the sport's revenue.
$500 million, all of it going straight to agents.
And you know what? Here's the part nobody tells you. That number is already incredibly out of date. The real figure has actually blown past $888 million in a single year. That is literally the highest in the history of the sport. We are looking at a market that's growing at this terrifying exponential rate, basically pulling cash directly out of the clubs and right into the pockets of middlemen.
So, what exactly are these people doing to earn that kind of money? Right? Are they financial geniuses? Are they just incredibly lucky? Or have they somehow managed to build the absolute most lucrative, do-almost-nothing side hustle in all of modern sports? Well, by the end of this explainer, you're going to understand exactly how this invisible economy works. We'll track how the money flows, uncover who's really footing the bill, look at the wild scandals that made some of these guys richer than the superstar athletes they actually represent, and we'll break down why FIFA tried to shut the whole thing down and completely failed. Stick around, because the most shocking number in this story, it isn't the one I just showed you. Okay, so let's kill the myth right off the bat. In the movies, an agent is this slick, fast-talking operator in a bespoke suit who shouts, "Show me the money," and miraculously lands a dream deal in one dramatic phone call. The reality? Well, it's a lot less cinematic and, honestly, a lot more exhausting. A football agent's real job is part lawyer, part salesperson, part babysitter, and part fixer. Sure, they negotiate the massive contracts and those crazy transfer fees, but they also handle image rights, they hunt down sponsorship deals, they quietly find a new club when a player inevitably falls out of favor with their manager, they manage the player's money, their cross-country moves, their housing situation, and yeah, sometimes they even manage their family drama. Think about it for a second. When a 19-year-old kid suddenly has $100,000 a week dropping into his bank account, often with, let's be honest, more money than sense, the agent is the one scrambling behind the scenes, keeping this whole delicate operation from just falling apart.
But here's the uncomfortable truth about all this. In this business, the amount of physical work you put in has almost nothing to do with the size of the payday you get out of it. Like, an agent can spend 5 years painstakingly developing a young talent in the lower leagues, driving them to training, buying their boots, and end up making practically zero. Or, on the flip side, they can send 3 carefully timed text messages on deadline day to orchestrate a record-breaking transfer, and boom, they walk away with an 8-figure commission. Which obviously raises the question, if the physical effort and the hours worked don't determine the money, what does? And more importantly, who is actually writing these enormous checks? Because I guarantee you, it might not be who you think it is.
All right, so this is the fundamental mechanism that confuses almost everyone who looks at the sport, and it's absolutely the engine driving the entire industry. When an agent earns a massive commission on a transfer, who actually pays it? Is it the player handing over a cut of their salary, or is it the club? Well, the surprising answer here is that in the vast majority of big deals, the club pays. Think about how incredibly strange that is for a moment. The agent works directly for the player, right? They're hired to get the absolute best deal for the athlete, but they get paid their millions by the club the player is joining? Imagine buying a house and you, the buyer, are forced to pay the seller's real estate agent out of your own pocket. That is exactly how football works, and it's exactly where things start to get remarkably murky.
Traditionally, because of just how loosely regulated this market was, an agent could earn a percentage from multiple sides of the exact same deal at once. They're representing the player, they're advising the buying club on how to structure the finances. Sometimes, they're even consulting with the selling club on how to maximize the fee. It's literally one person, 3 paychecks, 1 transfer. So, the commissions themselves typically range from around 5 to 10% of a transfer fee. Now, apply that math to the modern market. On a $100 million move, that is between $5 and $10 million going straight to the agent. And as global broadcast rights explode and the transfer market just balloons, those percentage slices become mind-boggling. Which is exactly why total agent fees skyrocketed from around $500 million just a few years ago to that record-shattering $888.1 million in 2023. To put that into perspective for you, English clubs alone spent more than $280 million on agents in that single year. So when you hear people complain that an agent did almost nothing, remember this absolutely crucial point. The system is deliberately built so that doing the deal, controlling the access, is what pays, not clocking in the hours. And nobody mastered that system better than a very small handful of men. Out of the thousands of registered and unregistered agents operating worldwide, there is a tiny, hyper-exclusive elite that controls the biggest names, the best talent, and, by extension, the biggest money. Meet the super agents. First up, there's Jorge Mendes, the Portuguese kingmaker. The founder of the mega agency Gestafute, Mendes built his empire from the ground up around a then-unknown super skinny teenager named Cristiano Ronaldo, and he simply never looked back. Today, his client list reads like a Ballon d'Or shortlist, and his estimated net worth sits comfortably north of $100 million. But Mendes didn't just negotiate transfers, you see. He entirely changed the meta of the game. He influenced which clubs bought which players, often moving multiple clients, players and managers alike, to the exact same team. This effectively created package deals that made him a literal power broker. The whole industry had to go through him if they wanted to compete.
Then you have the legendary Mino Raiola, the brute force negotiator. Raiola was famously reported to have made around 49 million euros on the massive Paul Pogba transfer to Manchester United. Seriously, just think about that for a second. On a deal worth roughly 105 million euros, nearly half that amount was paid out in agent commissions. Why? Because Raiola had brilliantly positioned himself to earn from multiple sides of that single transaction. Now, Raiola passed away in 2022, and control of his vast agency and its incredible roster of star clients largely passed to his longtime partner, Rafaela Pimenta. She seamlessly took the reins and is now easily one of the most powerful women in the entire sport.
And of course, we can't forget Jonathan Barnett, the volume player. Barnett co-founded the Stellar Group, which grew into one of the largest and most robust football agencies on planet Earth. We're talking managing hundreds upon hundreds of clients and engineering record-breaking, astronomical transfers, like Gareth Bale's move to Real Madrid. Where Mendes went for absolute prestige and high-end curation, Barnett, well, he went for sheer scale and market dominance. And crucially, Barnett was openly contemptuous of any administrative attempts to regulate his industry. He firmly believed that his agents earned every single penny they extracted from the market. For years, these men looked completely untouchable. I mean, they were the masters of the universe. But the exact same system that made them spectacularly rich also created a massive, glaring problem that football could no longer ignore. It was a problem hiding in plain sight, inside every single multi-million-dollar deal that crossed the wire. Ultimately, it boiled down to one profound ethical question. Whose side are they really on? Remember how we talked earlier about one agent getting paid by the player and the buying club and the selling club all wrapped up in the exact same transfer? Well, that mechanism is called multiple representation, and it is widely considered the original sin of the agent business. Because let's be real, if you are literally being paid by everyone at the negotiating table, whose interests are you actually protecting? When the exact same person advises the player to sign the contract, advises the buying club to match the valuation, and then takes a lucrative cut from both ends, the player can easily end up with a deal that is fundamentally better for the agent's bank account than it is for the player's career. Critics have argued for years that this exact conflict of interest is how some agents manage to earn more from a transfer fee than the player actually earned in their own wages. Just let that sink in for a second. The middleman is out-earning the world-class talent.
And then there's the much darker chapter of the industry, third-party ownership, commonly known as TPO. This is where outside investors, like hedge funds, private companies, or even just wealthy individuals, would step in and buy a percentage of a young player's future transfer value. It was, for all intents and purposes, like trading shares in a human being on the stock market. When that player was eventually sold to a bigger club, the outside investors cashed in on their equity. It severely blurred the line between representing athletes and outright owning them. It raised incredibly serious fears about who was actually controlling a player's career trajectory, you know? Were career-defining moves being made for genuine footballing reasons, or simply because an investment fund needed to liquidate an asset for an end-of-year financial return?
So, as you can imagine, the sheer scale of the money leaving the game eventually forced a response. In December 2022, after years of deliberation, FIFA finally approved sweeping, aggressive new rules called the Football Agent Regulations, which were set to take full effect in 2023. On paper, these rules weren't just a reform, they were a total revolution.
FIFA's plan rested on four major pillars. 1. A hard cap on commissions. Agents would be strictly limited to a small, fixed percentage of a deal, dramatically shrinking those jaw-dropping multi-million-dollar paydays practically overnight. 2. A mandatory licensing exam. To even legally call yourself an agent and operate in the market, you would have to actually pass a rigorous test proving your competency. 3. A severe crackdown on multiple representation, designed specifically to kill that rampant conflict of interest once and for all. And 4. Full financial transparency. This meant forcing every single fee to be publicly disclosed through a centralized clearinghouse so fans, clubs, and players could finally see exactly who got paid what. It was definitely a bold attempt to reel in the Wild West, but the empire struck back. The super agents didn't just accept it, they took FIFA to war.
They immediately sued the global governing body, utilizing top-tier legal teams to aggressively tie the regulations up in courts all across Europe, citing breaches of competition law and antitrust regulations. And it worked. By the end of 2023, under a massive wave of injunctions, the rules were suspended worldwide pending drawn-out legal battles, ensuring that for now, the system remains completely intact and the massive money just keeps flowing entirely uninterrupted.
So, let's look back at our initial question. Do football agents really make hundreds of millions of dollars doing quote-unquote almost nothing? Well, the honest, complex answer is, it depends entirely on what you call nothing. It's true, they don't run, they don't tackle, and they don't score goals. But they have positioned themselves at the single most valuable choke point in the entire global sport. That exact fleeting moment a superstar player and a massive fortune change hands. They didn't break the rules of the game, they simply understood them better, faster, and way more ruthlessly than anyone else. They built an empire in the gap nobody else was watching.
And that right there is the ultimate inescapable lesson of the agent business. The biggest money in modern football, and honestly perhaps in any massive global industry, doesn't always go to the people doing the most physical work on the pitch. It goes to the gatekeepers. It goes to the people standing in exactly the right place, holding the right keys when the mega deal finally gets done. And with FIFA's ambitious reforms currently paralyzed and tied up in endless court battles, that collective commission number, which, remember, is already rapidly approaching $1 billion a year, has absolutely nowhere to go but up.
So here is my question for you. Should agents' fees be strictly capped by governing bodies to keep money inside the sport? Or is this simply the free market doing what the free market does best? Drop your take in the comments below. If this explainer pulled back the curtain for you, hit subscribe, because next we are breaking down the real, mathematical reason why club transfer fees have gone completely insane over the last decade. And if you want to know which super agent is quietly becoming the most powerful person in football right now, that explainer is up next. Go check it out.